an analysis of a variety of issues that bother us all in the age of war in Ukraine, in the age of sanctions that touch upon millions of people, in the age of broken contracts, of broken relationships. And this is such a broad subject that I hope you will understand and appreciate that I'm not going to go into details. I am only going to provoke you into thinking what is relevant in this time of volatility. First, think about what kind of assets you'd like to move from one jurisdiction to another if that jurisdiction where they are held does not give full protection. You can think about all sorts of instruments. You can speak with the banks and use the banking systems, but you can also use cryptocurrencies or use tokens. You can use classical instruments. I have personally seen hundreds of Ukrainians traveling to Warsaw in their cars full of suitcases. And the word chemodan, suitcase, in Russian has become publicly known, commonly known in Poland, because people were carrying their valuables and cash in a very traditional way. Nevertheless, in all these cases, whether you're talking about trying to wire your money or using crypto or carrying your suitcase, you'll need to think about how to legalize. And that's why at the end, you should always think about how to process the relevant documentation, how to answer questions from the financial institutions, etc., etc. So there is no escape from legal review. In case of tangible assets, material assets such as equipment, cars, furniture, valuables, you can travel with many of those assets. So use traditional logistics instruments, and you can use a lorry or a train or go to a ship. But in any of those cases, you will still need to formalize. If your products need to travel, then you'll face a lot of paperwork to go through. In case of IP, it seems straightforward. You're talking about assignments, you're talking about contracts, but then you have to double check in the jurisdiction you're going to, whether the kind of IP that is protected in one jurisdiction is also protected in another, or if the protection that you have already ensured in one jurisdiction, whether you can extend it to another one. So again, plenty of legal work here. Contracts, if you have, let's say, a distributor agreement and you want to protect your distributorship rights, then clearly you can negotiate with your partners and arrange an assignment or sign a new contract. But then again, more legal work. And finally, if you've got a registered business in one jurisdiction, it may be extremely difficult to move the entire registration, the entity itself. You will probably have to take care separately of the financial assets, of the tangible assets, and the contracts and IP. There are all sorts of instruments that you can use. You can open a new business in another jurisdiction, so you can create a new co, or buy a company off the shelf if you want to start from working from day one. But then you will need to think about how to physically move all sorts of rights and assets, whether it's enough to sign a contract. In some cases, you'll need to take care of an increase of the share capital in order to account for the goods that you want to be transferred under a new roof. And in some cases, you will need to sell, organize a formal sale between one entity and the other. At first sight, it doesn't seem very attractive, but if you think about the tax regime on both ends, it may end up to be, in fact, a good idea. So here is the same list for those of you that prefer to take a look at the Russian version. Let me move on, because as I said, this is just a list of criteria and issues that should provoke you into your own analysis of your individual situation. Now, talking about relocation to a new place, there can be certain situations where none of these issues are relevant for your situation. Because if you're only concerned about moving of your financial assets into another jurisdiction, all you think about is their political and legal stability. But in most cases, you will have to face various kind of questions. In case of production of goods, or in case of sale or trading in some products, you'll have to look at the GDP, the population, the competition, because obviously, if you want to sell in a given market, then you have to know all these things. You have to think about entry barriers, and I'm not just talking about bans on certain activity. I'm talking about how easy it is to open a new company, to start working with a given product, whether there are any restrictions, permits, consents. What about the bureaucracy that you'll have to face? You have to think about all these issues. The political and legal stability, as I said, it concerns practically any situation of relocating of assets, and I think these days I do not need to explain why. And also, taxation will influence most of your financial decisions. Logistics and customs issues, they may be important in case of material goods, not necessarily financial assets. And this is not just about the ease of transportation or the customs rates. This is also about certain peculiarities of certain regimes. Think about transporting artwork. I recently had an example of an individual who wanted to send to the US a couple of pictures by artists that are relatively well known locally, but not very well known internationally. And one would think that this is not something that would be particularly interesting, but when we went through the customs clearance, we faced very banal problems. That is, the customs officers wanted to unpack, to unwrap the merchandise, and this led to a damage of one of the packages. So there are all sorts of these specific, peculiar problems that you would also need to look at. Finally, I would like to touch upon a factor that becomes very relevant in case people need to travel, and they need to travel unexpectedly, and they need to travel to new places. These days, you have almost 3 million Ukrainians who came to Poland. I bet most of those people never imagined that they would need to travel in such a short time to Poland and to organize a new life. And obviously, Ukrainians, they travel to all European countries, and they found different languages. They faced different mentalities. They faced some down-to-earth problems with which they weren't familiar before, and depending on how depending on their luck, but also depending on their individual adaptability, they were more or less successful. And this is obviously relevant not only for Ukrainian people. Anyone who needs, for some reasons, to travel to a new country and start a new life, they will have to think whether it is going to be just honey and roses, or whether it's going to be a difficult experience. Let's talk about some of these specific issues, and I will run through this part because, as I said earlier, I am just trying to provoke you into thinking which problems are relevant for you, which aren't. So these are just examples, and I'm not even going to discuss them in details. Talking about sanctions, you would think that these days sanctions, they're relevant only for Russians and Belarusians. But if you study this subject in more detail, you'll find out that even Americans can be found under sanctions. This is a new bill of law that is coming into force very soon, the 7th of June, which is banning American citizens from providing accounting services, legal services, corporate services, etc., etc. And there is talk that, of similar sanctions being imposed very soon in the European Union as well. And obviously, the lawyers are already busy trying to find solutions to this. Nevertheless, this one you can find particularly interesting to think of. The ease of doing business. As I said, before moving to a new jurisdiction, think in real life terms, how easy it is to do business in that particular country. For example, in the UK, there is very little bureaucracy, but talking about this particular comparison and this particular statistics, don't forget about what I said earlier. For a Russian-speaking citizen, it is not always easy to transfer to a jurisdiction where theoretically bureaucracy is minimal, but the language barrier can be important and the mentality can be different. On the other hand, if you look at further positions, there is more problems in terms of bureaucracy, but there perhaps is more opportunity. With certain businesses, it makes sense to look at the GDP of the countries that you're going to relocate your business to. Sometimes because you're going to sell your products there, and sometimes because you're going to live there. So before being attracted to a particular jurisdiction, think about what it can offer to you as a market for your products or services, and think of it, what it can offer to you in terms of lifestyle, in terms of availability of healthcare, for example, etc., etc. You may also look at historical charts, because obviously this is mostly about history, but this is also about reading trends, whether a given jurisdiction has been stable and whether it is trending or not. So look at the growth of the GDP in the past time and think about the prognosis for the future. With regard to taxation, this is a very simple comparison. It is basically a matter of statistics comparing the corporate tax rates. The statistics, I should say, is a very peculiar instrument. There is a saying that someone who's got their head in the oven and their feet in the refrigerator, statistically speaking, they find themselves in a natural, comfortable temperature. And this example is also relevant for the statistics concerning the corporate tax rates. Now look at the personal income tax rates. If you run a business that pays corporate income tax, then one day you want to transfer your money to the shareholders, and then you have to pay the personal income tax. It's not just about the corporate or personal income tax. It's also about exemptions. It's also about tax avoidance treaties. So also all sorts of very specific problems. Again, looking at various countries, look at the number of inhabitants, look also at the number of your co-nationals living in particular countries. If you want to go deeper, this is just an example concerning Poland, where I happen to live and spend most of my professional activity, but I have prepared similar charts for a number of jurisdictions. There's just no time to share them all here. Here, it's about telling you that if you want to engage yourself in a particular business, you have to make sure what kind of industries are trending in that particular country. In some cases, it's relevant to look at the infrastructure. Are you going to transport a lot of your products by road or by railway or by sea? Look at the situation in that country that you choose to work in. If you want to go outside Europe, or anyway outside the EU, if you look at the right at the map on the right, then you have, maybe doesn't sound that exotic, but still, the further you go, the more closely it makes sense to look at all these data. And here we go even further, looking at the Emirates and then Europe's cargo ports. For most of you, I'm sure these are just niches that you aren't concerned with in your daily decision-making situations, but in some cases, this kind of information can be very relevant. And again, country-specific information. You may also look at some business examples. This very simple diagram shows you the trend of foreign direct investment into my home country. We have seen in the past several years such a great inflow of money that is totally unprecedented if you look at other jurisdictions. So I say, why not follow the others by example? Look at what others have done, and this can come as an inspiration. And I'm not just talking about this phenomenon, because FDI is the only criterion. There are a lot of other criterions that are relevant for other jurisdictions, and obviously you think you should think yourself which one is relevant for you. Here is more specific information concerning the workforce structure, and with regard to workforce structure, information about unemployment. Many of you will need to look at these specific statistical comparisons, even if today you may think it's boring. It does not need to be boring if you happen to move to a new country. And finally, let's discuss this using an example. This is a very concrete situation that me and my team were studying right from March this year. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have under our roof a Ukrainian lawyer and a Belarusian lawyer, and we have many Ukrainian and Belarusian clients who physically go through these problems. We had a company, a manufacturer of wash basins, Moiki, and even though they had a very successful manufacturing plant in Ukraine and were very enthusiastic about moving the manufacture into Poland, when they looked at the competition in Poland and the pricing of the products, they finally decided to give up this idea and engage in other businesses, namely furniture. We had a client from Belarus who was interested in processing a transaction involving some software. He had a ready transaction arranged with an English client and was simply trying to set up a structure. And so we went through a number of problems, which you can look at on the right, starting from whether he would be better off setting up a new company or buying a shelf company. We had to hire an accountant. There was a language problem because he was looking for an accountant speaking not only English but also Russian. There was a problem of using the right tax jurisdiction. I'm here not talking about Poland. I am talking about overall analysis of a number of jurisdictions. And in the end, we came up with an international corporate structure offering the best tax solution. Finally, there was the question of a bank account with a Belarusian passport. As you can imagine, these days it is not easy to find a bank that would be willing to process a multi-million transaction. Nevertheless, we found a solution to that problem. Then, talking about warehouse space and accountability of goods and payment of taxes and stamp duty, this is coming to my first example. This was the experience of moving Ukrainian running businesses to Poland, and so lots of problems, not only in legal terms, but also in practical terms, such as logistics, warehouse space. And finally, transferring the IP, in this particular case, registration in the European databases, because the registrations that they were relying on were no longer relevant. Finally, I would like to close with this statement. What I have been talking about are just slogans, are just ideas, are just criteria. There is no solving of an individual problem without looking into individual situations, into individual peculiarities. And please don't even bother reading this list of problems. This is our stuff. This is legal stuff. And this is just to let you understand that the number of issues and the number of complexities that we need to face before proposing a concrete solution is very long. Thank you for your attention. It is a pleasure to be here.